More now on these new polls from the New York Times and Siena College that show some warning signs for President Biden's reelection bid. These are from the New York Times, Siena College, as I said, hypothetical matchups in 4 key swing states that show Trump taking the lead. Let's delve into this with CNN senior political commentator and former Obama senior advisor David Axelrod, who's also the host of the CNN podcast, The Axe Files. David, thanks for being here. I know you started a stir this morning for some Democrats when you questioned whether it's wise for President Biden to continue as a candidate in the 2024 race. You wrote on social media, if Biden continues to run, he will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. What he needs to decide is whether that is wise, whether it's in his best interest or the country's. I know David Axelrod. I've talked to David Axelrod a long time. That's David Axelrod sounding worried.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there is reason to be worried. There's not reason to panic because I was involved in a campaign in 2011 when, in fact, just around this time of year, there was a series of polls that Gallup did in battleground states that showed Obama trailing both Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, and we ended up winning that race by a substantial electoral margin. But there were things in this poll that were concerning, and I think people should not be Pollyannish about it. People should not be in denial about it. One of them was that Biden was basically running even with Trump among voters under 30. He carried them by 2-1 in 2020. That is one sign of concern. Another was that that Trump was carrying in this particular poll in these battleground states, 22% of the African American vote. That's 10% more than he did nationwide in 2020. And the Hispanic vote was relatively even, and that's a vote that Biden won handily in 2020. So these are warning signs, but the biggest one obviously has to do with age and how people view it. I believe, Jim, that Joe Biden has been a fine president, even a great president in many ways, and I think history is going to record that. And he's done things that have some generational importance. That said, he is not great in front of a camera anymore. There are signs of age, and he's going to be 81 this month, and people know that, and that's shot through this poll. 71% of people said that they thought he was too old to be president. Trump, a majority said Trump is not too old to be president, even though he's just 3.5 years younger than Biden, and the same kind of numbers relative to their mental acuity. I don't know. I don't think that reflects the reality, but I think it reflects their performance in front of cameras. And it fits into the larger Republican narrative, which is that, things are out of control and Biden's not in command. Again, I think it's more about performance in front of cameras than performance on the job. And I think his experience has shown in many ways, including globally. But all of these things are warning signs, and the stakes are so large. Yeah. Because you covered Donald Trump. He's not someone who believes in rules or laws or norms or institutions that are central to our democracy. His whole candidacy now is predicated on tearing those down. Whether it's a free and fair elections or the rule of law. And so there are real consequences to the outcome of this. And all I was saying is, think carefully about this. I don't believe anybody's going to take this nomination away from Joe Biden. If he wants to run, and he says he's running, I think he will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. But the whole party needs to be cognizant that this is going to be a major challenge. And one last point, Jim. Sure. I think that if the president is moving forward, and I expect that he will, they very quickly have to turn this into a comparative race. They spent a lot of the fall trying to sell people on the president's economic achievements, and there are major economic achievements, but that's not where the country's mind is at. The economy was very lowly rated here, and they need to get into a much more comparative mindset vis-a-vis Trump on every issue, and force people to make a choice and not turn this into a referendum.
Well, so David, that leads me to this question. Do you think Joe Biden should consider not being the nominee, not running?
I think Joe Biden, like I said, I think that's up to him, and I'm not going to tell him what to do. I don't think anybody can tell him what to do or should tell him what to do. But I think he needs to consider carefully what these and other numbers and data he's getting suggests, and make a judgment as to whether he, in fact, is the best candidate to take on Trump. There was a matrix in this poll, a chart that reflected the fact that 8% that Trump lost to a generic Democrat by 8%. Kamala Harris even did a little better than the president against Trump. And I think age has a lot to do with this. So, and one thing we know for sure, he's not going to be younger a year from now. So right. I do think there are serious things to consider, including his legacy, which should be strong, but obviously will be impacted if he runs and doesn't win this race. So he needs to just consider, am I the strongest candidate to defeat Donald Trump? And if he thinks the answer is yes, then start running against him every single day.
Yeah. Well, David, some Democrats are saying there's no cause for concern here. Obama, as you know, was in this place 2011. Bill Clinton was trailing in 1995. If you take a look at this Washington Post poll from 1982, showed a majority of voters did not want Ronald Reagan running for a second term. I mean, that was something the Washington Post reported way back in 1982. Yeah. So, I mean, it is different, though, when Trump is the nominee. Reagan, Obama didn't have to run against Donald Trump. The stakes are much higher.
The stakes are higher. And Trump, for all we know about him, you have to give him, you have to acknowledge his feral genius for this kind of political warfare, this media environment. The fact that he is in the position he's in right now is quite remarkable. So he needs to be taken very, very seriously. And it's also true that that both Obama and Clinton were, about 50 years old when they were running for re-election, and they were running against Bob Dole and Mitt Romney, not Donald Trump. So I don't know that that is those are apt comparative. There's no point in trying to talk yourself into thinking that this isn't a real challenge. And and that's really my message to Democrats is don't stop talking about bedwetters. It's not bedwetting to be concerned. Now, you may want to turn that concern into action, and the campaign itself may want to get into a different gear, but it's not bedwetting. These are real fundamental challenges.
And do you think it's because Joe Biden has said, I got Ukraine to deal with, I've got the Middle East to deal with, the campaign will come, and perhaps a Rose Garden style re-election campaign is just not what's in the cards for Joe Biden this time around, and that this may just be a brass knuckles brawl with Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump is only 3 years younger than Joe Biden. We've been showing in recent days all of his verbal slip-ups out on the campaign trail. He's not exactly batting 1,000 when it comes to reading the teleprompter himself, and yet Biden is the one with this perception problem and not Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, that's the narrative that is sunk in. And I think partly because Trump, even though some of the things he says are just lunacy and, references to wrong countries and, we've seen those serially, but he is very energetic and nobody doubts that. And sometimes Biden's presentation is less than energetic. And I think that is part of the contrast. But and the president is doing what the president should. We've got tremendous challenges right now, foreign and domestic, and he's attending to them. But that doesn't mean that his campaign can't be engaged every day in drawing the contrast between Biden and Trump and really taking the case to Trump. I mean, Trump's the nominee. I think that seems pretty clear. It's very unlikely that he's not going to be the nominee. So start framing the case against him. I wouldn't wait.
And what do you say to, I mean, I'm sure you've taken a lot of incoming today. from fellow Democrats and progressives when you tweeted this, put this on X, whatever you want to call it, earlier this morning. It sounds as though there are folks on the left who just don't want to have this conversation. And what is your message to them to say, you got to have this conversation?
Well, my message is that the stakes couldn't be higher. This is not a normal election. I mean, it will be a fundamental event on if Donald Trump were reelected because of the thing I said earlier, because he is not the pro-democracy candidate in this race. Although one of the alarming things in this poll in this battleground state is the question was asked, who do you think would do a better job on a series of issues? I mentioned earlier that Trump had a 22-point lead on the economy, but on democracy, Biden only had a 3-point advantage. Now, I don't know, because I don't know if people knew what democracy exactly meant in that context, but people should not be confused about this. I mean, there's one candidate who is committed to the institutions of our democracy and the norms and rules and laws of our democracy. And there's another candidate who flouts them and disdains them and is overtly running against them, the rule of law, the sanctity of free and fair elections, and so on. I just think that the stakes are so large that to pretend, if the idea that, well, let's not talk about these challenges because maybe people won't notice them. Well, guess what? What these polls say is, yeah, people are noticing them. And we better have a strategy for dealing with them if you're a Democrat, because this election could be lost.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much a race between a Democrat and a wannabe dictator. And if anybody wants to read this Washington Post story that's out this evening talking about how aides and people around Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself have been talking about a campaign of retribution if he is elected president again. David Axelrod, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. I know it was a little bit of a close shave getting you on this evening, no pun intended, but thanks very much for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Always good to be with you, Jim. Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.